700 miles.
Bermuda. Blue skies, crystal waters, pink sandy beaches. An island of unparalleled beauty. Since the turn of the century, tourism has been the island's dominant industry. For the Bermudian people, this meant walking a line between how the visitors perceived them and how they perceived themselves. Watch any promotional material on Bermuda, and you get the sense that Bermuda's strongest cultural influence comes from Great Britain. Listen to the music, however, and you'll know that there's an even stronger influence from the Caribbean and Black America. This documentary explores the hidden side of the Bermudian reality through the eyes of the musicians and entertainers, many of whom lived and worked in both worlds.
Bermuda music had a large part to play in the lives of Bermudians. This, in its historical context, came before the video, before the television, before cable, when people had very little to do. And so Bermudians were very creative with how they used what little spare time they had. Very often, you're talking about up until maybe the 60s, people only had a half a day on a Thursday, and if they were lucky, a half a day on a Saturday. And so when they had that time, they used it to its maximum.
And in the early part of this century, very few Bermudians had money to buy instruments, so many aspiring musicians did the next best thing.
I used to like to make my own instruments in those days. It was fascinating. I'd get a piece of wood, and I'd put nails in each end of it. My father was a sailmaker, so I would get fishing line and make strings for this instrument with this. Then I'd get a piece of cedar wood for a bridge and put under it, so when I wanted to raise the tune, I would either wind the line around the nail or I'd pull the bridge back a little to raise or lower the tune. And then I used to sit out there and entertain the tourists, because the public road in those days ran right past the Spanish Point, where the Spanish Point Boat Club is now. That was our homestead. And it went right to the water side, where they had to turn around, and the horse and carriages that brought the tourists would turn around there and drive back out. Well, I'd get in the area where the horse would have to stop to turn around, and I used to entertain the tourists for nickels and quarters or whatever they would give me. I eventually made enough money to buy my first guitar.
Many of the island's young musicians also drew inspiration from the gumbays. The tradition of the gumbe came with the arrival of slaves from Africa and the Caribbean. Slaves barred from public assembly would communicate with each other through the various rhythms of the gumba drum. Later, with the integration of American Indian folklore and the European-style drum, this sound evolved into the sound of a Bermuda gumbe.
Well, you know, we had what we call Shady's cry, and we had North's cry. And us kids, we used to have our own little cry. We used to get crocus eggs and whip them up and put little tassels and the tops of bottles on the back and make our little cloaks and put a little thing on our heads. And I used to be the snare drum, and I had a little guy that used to play the box, and we used to have a little gumbe cry like that. And that's how I came to playing the drums.
Tootsie would be making noise because he was always a guy that was beating on something. And so if it was Tootsie making noise, my grandpa would say, well, who's that making noise about? I'll say, well, it's Tootsie making noise. So because Tootsie couldn't beat on something, he would practice his rudiments on my head. So as a result of that, you'll find me more like a rhythmologist.
For Bermudians, The very first orchestrated sounds were those of the big bands of the 1930s. There were several exceptional musicians performing around the island during that time. Musicians like Al Davis, Ernie Leader, Pot Gilbert, and Kenny Iris. But for many, there was one musician who became an icon.
The greatest musician, I would say, of that time, of that era, was a fellow named Mark Chesterfield Williams, you see. He was, in fact, I suppose, to make it very simple, he was like my stepfather, I would say. You know, my father died when I was 3 years old. My mother got in with Mark, you know, he's a musician. And he was the daddy of all musicians during that time. I have to give the absolute bulk of credit for my being a musician, period, is Mark Williams.
My first professional job, I was 14 years old. I sang in a concert at the Colonial Opera House, and in the audience was the man named Mr. Mark Williams, who was like the godfather of all the musicians in Bermuda. He taught most of the people that played blowing instruments. And someone came up and said there was someone that wanted to see me, and he came backstage and talked with me. And he gave me a job singing with his band.
From the turn of the century to the early 1930s, the black community made tremendous strides in social and economic development. Far from being embraced, these accomplishments were tolerated by the white community, and a few musicians like Mark Williams were even allowed to perform in the hotels. The advent of the Great Depression of the 1930s in America saw millions of whites on breadlines. This translated into a shift in attitudes by a community under economic threat. In Bermuda, whites began to shut the doors to their establishments.
Blacks were not allowed even to play in the hotels. You couldn't go in there as a guest, and you could not perform in the hotels. And the only possible time that you would is if they had a staff dance and engaged one of the local bands to play for the staff party. But other than that, you weren't allowed in the hotels.
There's a high standard of musicianship locally, very high standard. I mean, people like Ghandi at 14 was on the Major Bowles show. Lance would play any show that came in. I mean, you have people like Kenny Iris, you know, Mark Williams himself. These are people, expert musicians who were being marginalized because they were colonials, they were black colonials, and this was a segregated society. Not just segregated, not just them, but I mean people like Sarah Vaughan and, you know, big American stars who came and had to suffer the indignity of you know, everything that goes along with segregation, back entrances, playing to, you know, second-rate facilities, really humiliating kind of, and angering stuff.
And we were only allowed to change in the public toilet. You didn't have dressing rooms. And if it rained, we went into the boiler room and we stood there until our clothes got dry. You'd take off your coat and you'd put it on the pipes on the boiler. You'd take off your shirt and put it on the boiler. And when it dried, and when you went on stage to sing, the water would be running out of your shoes still. But we used to get on there, smile, and sing through the whole thing.
Bermuda is another world, 700 miles at sea, and the way the people greet you is like a friendly melody. To a touch of flower in the morning to listen to a honeybee, to hear a bird who sings a song, just to say that he's free.
In spite of the struggle to enter the hotels for work, there were more than enough venues where local musicians could jam.
All through Bermuda, we had dance halls. All through Bermuda, from Somerset to St. George, the old Rack and St. George's, and up at Broome Street there, where they had the old theater there. And in the summertime, they had patios, and of course, the Odd Fellows halls, you know, through Bermuda. The large halls were always rented for dances.
There weren't many women performing in the 1930s and 40s, but there were some. Generally, they were pianists in the groups, and more than likely, it would be Olive Bean, Sue Smith, or Muriel Calabras.
Ghandi Burgess.
World War II. Bermuda's strategic location meant the arrival of hundreds of Allied troops from the United States. With them came an overwhelming musical influence.
We always loved to play jazz, and we were, you know, we were very enthusiastic about jazz, and because we're so close to the United States. And we used to get a lot of jazz stations on the radio, and everybody wanted to play like the Americans.
See, we depended on the old 78 records coming down on the ship, and everybody go down and buy these. These were like, you know, the Ella Fitzgerald, whoever, you know, in those days, the great American bands of those days, and we'd all get together and listen to them. I mean, not even everybody had a radio then, and those that did, and fortunate enough to have a shortwave radio, they could get BBC on a Sunday afternoon and have like Geraldo's big band, you know, and within that big band there would be a five-piece jazz band that would emerge from that and come out in front, and they'd play tremendous jazz, you know.
During the war, I was then working with Kenneth Harris, but they used to send in American groups to perform. People like Ella Fitzgerald and Ray Brown and these people all would come in. The Glenn Miller Band, all the big bands would come in and perform at the base. And they used to perform in the hangar down there. And the hangar held like probably 5,000 people. I think the worst night of my life happened there on that base during the war. All the American troops came in, and they were on their way to Dunkirk. And they came at the base, and there was 5,000 of them. And most people I had performed for was probably 200. So you can imagine how I felt when I walked in and saw these people. That wasn't so bad, but like a month later, most of these people came back because they had been blown up when they landed on the beaches at Dunkirk. And when I walked out on the stage, those same youngsters that went across, and I had sung to about a month before, where there were no arms, legs blown off, patches, blood all over the place. They brought them back to give them a rest before they went back to America. And when I hit the stage, I just froze. And as I tried to walk off the stage, they pushed me back on the stage, and I sang for them.
But while jazz from the United States had its influence on local culture, calypso from the Caribbean took this country by storm.
Take a ride on Bermuda buggy ride, an old-fashioned hoggy ride when the moon is bright outside. Get a girl, sit your girl right in your lap, grip your whip and make it snap.
One of the major acts of the day was the Tolbert Brothers. Tourists so enjoyed the Tolbert Brothers, they began to seek out more local music and eventually found clubs like the Playhouse Inn.
Me and my chick was once eating bread. She took a comb and started to scratch me head. Me and my chick was once eating bread. She took a comb and started to scratch me head. In a romantic way, she then held me.
Well, the managers used to come down to Playhouse to investigate because we were taking all the people out of the hotels. And because they saw the performances there, it's the reason why they started to hire the performers from Playhouse Inn in the hotels. Hamilton Hotel was the first, then it was Bermudiana, Elbow Beach, Belmont.
An old cowpoke went riding out one dark and windy day. And on a ridge he rested as he went along his way. When all at once a mighty herd of red-eyed cows...
Inevitably, calypso became the mainstay of hotel entertainment.
All the hotels had local entertainment, and also there was a different show each night.
Oh yes, that was beautiful at that time. Bermuda was at a stage that I don't think I'll ever see it again in my lifetime, with the tourism and the hotels, management and staff was really beautiful at that particular time.
Most of the tourists at that time enjoyed local entertainment because it was something that gave them a flavor of what we, the Bermudians, were all about and how we presented ourselves musically.
Some of the great moments to work as a drum soloist, which went in the center of the floor and performed at the fullest. It demanded your physical, mental strength to play these variety of rhythms and to reach the people.
The industry choice of calypso over jazz meant that a lot of what was taking place in the local jazz scene remained in the nightclubs. But any tourist who ventured there would find one of the greatest jazzmen of the day, Lance Hayward.
Jazz really wasn't what the hotels wanted at that time. The hotels, they wanted to hear calypsos. Well, Lance started to have problems getting work for his group, you know, because he wanted to put a show in the hotels, you know, like a package group. His band, have singer, a dancer and all, but the hotel owners told him that, you know, the people wouldn't go for that.
I know that Lance, in the 60s especially, coming up to the end of segregation, his wife Mary was an official in the Progressive Labor Party. Remember that this is a time when there's also a struggle on for the empowerment to vote for, you know, the franchise. So this is, you know, politically quite hot. And here's this man who's dependent on his art for his living, also being a political voice. Doesn't go down too nicely. And he spoke quite candidly about being blackballed.
Frustrated, Lance Hayward eventually left Bermuda and made a name for himself as one of the best jazz musicians in the United States. He died there in 1991.
Our dreams won't come tumbling to the ground. We'll hold them fast.
During the 60s, we were into the Black Power movement era. So everything was black consciousness and culture consciousness, and we dealt with our roots, trying to disseminate the information of our history and heritage through dance and music.
Harmonizing trios, quartets, quintets, small high school bands, they were popping up by the dozens.
The key thing was the battle of the groups. That was what every aspiring artist looked forward to in every high school. We want, you know, they'll get the acts together, they'll rehearse, they'll have the talent shows at the school, and then the best act that came out of the school, whoever won the talent show, came and auditioned at Joel's Alley for the battle of the groups.
They used to have these talent shows at Rosebank, which was very healthy. Everybody had somewhere to go. It was something that's like a, if you want to say, a center for the music. I thought they should have never demolished it, really.
I remember the first time I performed. I mean, I used to look at that stage and say, one day we'll get up there and perform. And we did the ballad groups, ballad newcomers. That was during the time of the Formula 3. They were strong. We came third once. Never come first when they were performing.
If I messed up things, darling, for you and your last plans, tell you what I'll do if I give it another chance. Show my heart is true. I'll take you to the house of romance. To the house of romance. Another chance. Another chance. Another chance with you.
Oh, I had so many shows at the Rosebank. I had a lot of local shows, and I brought in foreign acts. I had a lot of my Miss Bermudas there. I even had a show at the tennis stadium. I brought the Cadillacs here and had them down #1 shed. I had the Isley brothers. I had them at the tennis stadium. I brought Muhammad Ali here. We had an exhibition at the tennis stadium.
Olive's career in entertainment began as an exercise to organize the youth in her neighborhood.
I took over my father's restaurant, Richardson's Restaurant, and from there on, a lot of the kids used to come in at the shop, and I started a youth club. So I used to have a little talent show among the members, and we went from back at the patio, back at the shop, having little shows there, and we went to Clay House, and it just grew and grew and grew.
One of the aspiring stars to come under Olive's wing was very young, very talented Michael Curtis Clarke. Michael made his debut at 9 years old, winning first prize in the talent contest at the Clay House Inn. His talents were likened to those of the most popular child performer of the day, Stevie Wonder. Clarke grew up touring Bermuda's music scene, performing at nearly all the entertainment venues on the island, including the hotels. He eventually formed the Cortinas, then the Onion Patch, and toured extensively overseas.
During that period, Michael Clarke and his group could only play in one key, which was the key of E, which for guitar players is an easy key. And after that, I became very, very instrumental in Michael Clarke's group. With the expertise that I had from all the musicians that I had been around, I shared the same information with Michael and his group.
Guided by experience and the teaching of local musicians that came before him, Michael Clarke became a formidable songwriter. And by the late 1960s, when the wave of social unrest blanketing the United States ignited here in Bermuda, Michael Clarke was there to document the events through his music.
We know good from evil. We know good from evil. Good to us is a natural thing.
Right now, the youths at the other end of Court Street are advancing.
We must work together to maintain law and order. We must work together to remove any causes which may have contributed to our present problems. Violence of any kind cannot be tolerated or condoned.
The outskirts of Hamilton is slowly but surely taking on the look of a war zone. In the background now we see the Sunshine Company here on Woodbourne Avenue, and it's completely gutted by fire.
State of emergency, 911. Got to set the captives free, 911. A state of emergency, 911. Got to set the captives free.
By the 1970s, the independence movements in the rest of the diaspora had reached a peak, and like the United States, the music of the Caribbean reflected the revolutionary spirit of the time. Reggae music introduced to the world a new rhythm and a new philosophy, Rastafari.
What reggae music is, it's a gospel music, you know, in a musical chant to the people. It's just another way for us to express ourselves to the people, or come close to the people in a musical chant, you know.
Reggae came in the scene in the early 60s, but people, it wasn't popular, right? But it was just something different that I guess it was part of me, you know? And we just learned by listening to records, you know what I mean, and tried it out. Then we put a little bit of stuff in it, as you know, Bermudans love to do. And it started to catch on. Other people didn't really understand these dreads coming around, you know. They didn't understand Rastafari at that time, you know. So it was a struggle, it wasn't easy.
Some clubs had made a law that no plaits allowed, which they really meant no dreadlocks allowed. So that kind of dampened the areas for dread information to play at that time. So that's some of the traps and snares that I speak about the system. But that's changed now.
By this time, Bermuda's quest to find its cultural identity was well underway. In trying to find itself, Black Bermudians found Islam, Rastafari, the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, Hebrewism, Black nationalism, and socialism.
With everybody seeking for unity, and with the advent of these different groups coming on, it seemed like unity was becoming more and more out of reach, right? And it was causing a lot of concern. We sat down and put our heads together, and we came up with a concept of Culture Fest with a group called the United Culture Committee that formed around these various groups. And as of so, we developed Culture Fest, and the theme was unity in the community. And music was the lure that we used to develop this concept.
The 1970s music scene did indeed provide something for everyone. This translated to an abundance of work for local musicians.
We were really working, and that was like how we earned our stripes, because we were playing all the time. And I was about 22, 24 years old, and I was a full-time musician. That's all I did. And I think that was the heyday of Bermuda artists and stuff, because, you know, things were really jumping, at least for us.
There was also an eagerness to record music. One of the most memorable tunes from that era was Sizzling Hot.
Sizzling Hot was hot as head, I must admit. The clubs used to use it as the song for closing the club with. What inspired that song was the tune To Be Real by Cheryl Lynn. And I remember the chord progression was so simple, but it was such a funky groove.
It seemed that all was well on the entertainment front until the Rosebank Theater, home to so many aspiring entertainers, shut down.
Through the closure of Rosebank Theater, really was the straw that broke the camel's back. I mean, that was the main venue. Once that was shut down and turned into a banking facility, there was no outlet. There was no major venue big enough to facilitate the battle of the groups anymore. So that was the beginning of the decline of local artists having venues and having a place to show their wares, to show their talent.
By the mid-1980s, the hotels began to make dramatic changes in how their guests were entertained.
Well, I saw a decline coming in entertainment when I was working in the hotels with the fiery limbo dancers. And I saw the decline coming when gradually they cut out the house bands. Then when you look, there was nothing but disco music. And then I could see, if I can say so, the attitude in management about certain things to do with entertainment.
Changes?
The changes that were happening then. And I knew in my mind that this was not going to be for too much longer.
In 1981, the workers of Bermuda downed tools in a general strike. The demands made by the workers and their show of solidarity sent shockwaves through the offices of the island's economic elite. This elite included hoteliers who were hardest hit by this industrial action. Forced to make economic adjustments, they may have hastened the demise of an already weakening art.
I know one of the things that is happening now that I find difficult to bear is that the people who hire music generally are food and beverage people on the big hotels. They're not interested in quality or kind of music. They're interested in the bottom line. So you have a Swiss or German or whoever, Italian guy, you know, he may not in his own country been interested in music, you know? And clearly, in many cases, is not interested in music here either. So what happens is that he is not thinking about cultural continuity or the creative process.
You know, we've gotten into, I think, international banking, which is, I think, the first business of the day. And at one time, tourism was the top thing. And we had to provide entertainment and for the tourists. So therefore, it encouraged youth to go out and perfect their craft and to give the tourists a good show.
There was a time when there were live bands around. There were bands everywhere. But then what started to happen was that as the music changed, I don't think that enough of the musicians changed with the music. So I think that what's happening now when we're having these sound clashes and things like that, these reggae dancehall clashes, it's the same thing that was happening at Rosebank back in the day when they were having the battles of the groups and all of those sorts of things. Just that the music is different. The atmosphere is, of course, different, but we can't expect things to stay the same.
The Playboy is made up of me, myself, Clarke and Spence, stage name High Top, and then there's another gentleman by the name of Stacy Seymour, that's Kutchy, that's where you get High Top and Kutchy. And we guys have worked together for years from the beginning. We worked together, we're still together, we had the same name for years. Dancehall. So it all, you know, it started from Bob Marley, more or less, right? And he brought it through. Okay, the tempo has changed, so that the tempo is faster. That's what it really is, the tempo is faster. And if anything you need to understand reggae, you need to understand Jamaican slang, because that's where it's from, Jamaica. It's not jungle. There's a lot of stuff, there's a message in it, but you have to sit down and read. You might need somebody to interpret it to you, like me, and you could get a better understanding of it.
Greetings in the name of my God, see, my God, your God, our God, see, in the name of Lord God, Jesus Christ, see, Playboy, see.
Attracted to the hip-hop style of Kirk Franklin, young people are also drawing inspiration from gospel music. the backbone of black music.
I think that musicians never were really concerned about style. I think that that's something that the church itself has to deal with, and my view on that is that, you know, the Bible has a lot to say about content and very little to say about style. And so I think that was for a good reason, that we can really just go ahead and explore whatever styles we want to and that reflect who we are.
There is also a new business acumen among the musicians turned producers.
We need the business community here to realize that arts makes money. One gold record is 500,000 units, right? That's over $1 million in one 3-minute song.
90% of it is going to come from marketing. I don't care how good you sound or how good your song is. You know, if you don't have the strength to market your product or your artist, you can never get heard.
There is a lot of good talent here in Bermuda. And what they really need is venues and encouragement to carry on.
Music has a way of making us feel right about ourselves. Any kind of achievement and accomplishment is reflected in that, so that at that very grassroots level, music has a way of making us feel well, and then with that view, we are able to more appropriately apply the knowledge that we have.
Music has 4 prongs: entertainment, social commentary, economics, and spirituality, and it all equals culture.